Now, today we will add to the communion experience with the addition of taking a few moments to prepare our hearts and minds for sacred instruction. Now, this portion requires the use of one gold raw candle and or one white nectar candle and quality frankincense, which is called seneter in the Kemet tradition, which translates as divine fragrance. If you don't have these things, it's also fine. You can still gain value from this process nevertheless. So let us begin. Now, as you light your candles and your incense, take a few moments and allow the spirit of quietude to alight upon you. And then sooner before later, you'll notice that something as unassuming as lighting a candle and burning incense can make you instantly and automatically relax. Relaxation leads to your peace. Your peace opens the way to your power. And as you sit with an aura of calmness and contemplate the energy of the day, with every inhalation and exhalation, all static energy, stagnant energy, and negative energy gets pushed outwards and away until only you remain, perfectly centered and calm, like the black dot in the center of the circle, or the symbol of Ra. Now, after your next few breaths, you'll be ready to emerge, relaxed, refreshed, and renewed, and fully capable of grasping the lessons and the layers of today's sacred instruction. Amen. Ma'at. Iyiti, and welcome to the Communion Experience. Once again, this is your host, the Nasit Bidi Ra Sanku Kheper, Chief and Head Priest of the Templeofanu, facilitating our bi-weekly discussions about how to walk in peace and power by way of the teachings of the ancient Kemetic tradition. So let us get into what we call the word of the day. Now, the word of the day is when we take one word from the ancient hieroglyphic language that we call Sesh Medu Neter, which are the divine written words, or Jed Medu, spoken words, or words that tell. So we take one word and we expound on the basic agreed upon understanding according to the culture and what the scholars have given us. But then we go back for a more metaphysical gloss, because we're always looking for is possible spiritual and metaphysical implications or applications to our current lives and situations. So let us begin. So Kheper is the word of the day. The word of the day is Kheper. Now, this word consists of 4 glyphs. Starting with the first glyph, we have the placenta. It represents the letter K with the sound value of Khe, like a K-H-E sound. So it's not really the letter K, but it's a Khe sound. The next symbol, we have the stool, and it represents the letter P with the sound value of Pa or Pe. The next symbol, we have the mouth. I think the mouth came up in like four communions so far. So the mouth represents the letter R with the sound value of Ra or Re or Yira or Yire. And lastly, we have what's known as the determinative. So for the determinative, we have the scarab. The scarab, from the word scarabaeus, is the word from the Greek word beetle. A determinative or determinatives are indicators as to how we might go about the translation of a word. Generally, a determinative is not to be pronounced, but what's interesting about this word is that the determinative has a dual function in its sense. The beetle, in this instance, serves as a trilateral. A trilateral is when you have one symbol that is pronounced with 3 syllables. And those 3 syllables are ke, pe, er. Ke, pe, er. And when you contract it, it becomes Kheper. Now the translation, the agreed upon translation or translations of the word is transformation. To be born. To come into existence. To become. To develop. To transform oneself. So now as we go back to the top for metaphysical gloss, we look back at the placenta, and we all know the placenta is a temporary organ that is attached to the uterus. And it informs us that something is being nourished within, something that is to be born, or something that is to come into existence. So in the sense of Kheper, when it's used for the word Kheper, it's implying that transformation is what fuels existence. Now you look at the next symbol is the stool or the foundation. Stools are used to sit, or a foundation is something that you use to set something upon. When you have the images of the statues or the tutus of the netters or the netterettes, or we say the netteru, they're sat on a pedestal or a stool or a stand, and it represents something to pay attention to. And next we have the mouth. The mouth is actually used for the word to act or to do or to take action or action. And what is the action of the mouth? The mouth is a transformer. It masticates or it chews food and it extracts or brings forth its nutrients for the khat or the physical body. In other words, it transforms food into a usable source of energy for the body. The second implication of the act of transformation of the mouth is the mouth by way of speech is used to transmit or bring forth thoughts and ideas of the Ab. The Ab is the heart and mind. In all ancient texts, the heart and mind were always used interchangeably. Since we already reference on more than several occasions the book known as the Knowing the Evolutions of Ra and Overcoming Apep or Overcoming Evil. And I know it may sound redundant, but that's how the brain works, or that's how the brain learns. It learns through repetition. And it implies that sometimes we need to slow down and to contemplate things deeper, as opposed to just being excited and just running on to the next exciting idea or the next exciting glyph or series of words. In all traditions worthy of mention, they've always had individuals, priests and priests, to study, to meditate, and contemplate the deeper meaning of the text. Because all texts are really talking about you. When they're talking about God or gods, they're talking about you, the true you that is identical with Neter, differing not in quality, but in quantity. Neter is boundless and infinite, but within us, Neter is experienced in itself as a human being through us. You heard of the saying, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. That saying is to be attributed to Professor Smalls, Professor James Smalls, who's still amongst us, is one of the most profound scholars of this day and time. I've actually had the privilege, or we at the Templeofanu had the privilege of meeting Professor Smalls. He came through one time. We was filming a documentary. We invited him to come through on a documentary, and he came, and he was running a little bit late. And so our ceremony started because we invited him to a communion. So the documentary footage would be shot after communion. So we wanted him to come and experience what it is that we do, or what it is that we have to offer to the world. So he was running a little bit late. So by the time he got there, the ceremonies had already started. So when he came into the room, and I noticed he had like a hoodie on and he had jeans, and I thought that was very peculiar because even though I never met Professor Smalls, I never seen him wear a hoodie or jeans on any of the interviews that I seen him on or any platform that I seen him on. So he looked slightly uncomfortable, and he was just checking us out and just surveying the room, and then he left. And I said, oh man, I hope we didn't offend him. I hope this was not too deep for him. And then a few moments later, he came back in, and he had his full African garb on with the hat and everything. And by the end of the ceremony, or by the end of the day, after everything was done, we filmed the documentary. We shared some words, and he said he had called Baba Heru to check us out to see if we were legit or not. And you all know Baba Heru is attributed as the founder of the Kemetic lifestyle over here in America since the early 70s. So Baba Heru, which is a great friend of mine, gave us a glowing report and a glowing review. So Professor Smalls obliged and came through, but he said for whatever reason, he just considered it as another function that he was going through. But when he came in and he saw the drums, when he heard the drums and he heard the Hesse and he felt the Hesse, he said, oh shoot, these people are serious. And he said, let me get my thing together. And he went and changed and got his thing together and came back out. And he said, you guys are the real deal. So big up to Professor Smalls. And finally, we'll deal with the scarab. The scarab is Kheper, the beetle. And you all know the popular definition. The beetle utilizes dung for food and reproduction. Dung is manure. Manure equals fertilizer. So this is a metaphor of the manure of experiences. Our experiences offer us the opportunity to recreate and rebirth ourselves. So there you have it. We have metal nectar, the words of nature. So spirituality and nature are intricately evolved or involved. So when you see in the Kemetic tradition and African traditions, religious and spiritual imagery comes from everyday life. They're extrapolations of agricultural societies. So we're looking at Kheper in the dung. The dung is used interchangeably with the sun, but the dung is manure. It is feces from what? The cow. But then the cow is representative of Het Heru, the great mother. So when you see ATR traditions and Kemetic traditions, there's always this intimate dance between the mundane and the mystical, and the profane and the profound. So there you go, Kheper as the word of the day. Yeti. Now, today's discussion is going to be called the power or the sacred power of transformation. Now, the last communion we discussed, What Have You Learned? It was called What Have You Learned Part 2. And outside of the two communions that we did about Wet Rempet, because that is a sacred holiday of ours, I've been staying vigilant to sticking to the themes of the year, not just doing communions just to fulfill the obligation of doing a bi-weekly discussion or talk. So we're trying to move this in a certain direction. So the overall themes of the year were transformation, which is completion, which transition, death, radical change. But those weren't the only parts of the reading. So today is going to represent a transition to dealing with other things that were said in the reading, but it's going to be a short talk still about the sacred power of transformation. I feel like since this year is the year of the number 9, the talk should have been revolving around transformation, and I probably shouldn't have to do another talk to another 9 years from now about transformation. However, my name is Kheper. I'm a child of Kheper, so I will always have a word or two about transformation. So as you see from the word of the day, transformation is the nature of existence. Transformation is the netter of existence. That was a double entendre. The nature of existence and the netter of existence. That is Kheper. And for the umpteenth time, we always go back to the book of knowing the creations of Ra and overcoming Apep or evil, where Ra's talking about bringing things into creation. There's a lot of talk in our community about transformation. There's a lot of romanticization about transformation, but oftentimes a lot of people get stuck in transformation or quit somewhere through transformation. Probably because with transformation comes some measure of pain and some measure of discomfort. And by now we should understand what it is that pain and discomfort is supposed to do. So we say that pain is weakness leaving the body. As a martial artist, I can relate to this. So martial artists have a very interesting relationship with pain. In one sense, you actually hate it, but it serves its purpose. Pain in martial arts or in any discipline is there to break the spirit of disingenuousness. Once again, pain is to break the spirit of disingenuousness. For instance, in martial arts, what makes a person want to learn martial arts? You have to figure that out. Do you want it for self-defense? Did something happen to you? Or have you seen the movies and you want to do the things that you see in the movie? You want to wear the fancy outfits? So pain is going to be the gatekeeper at the crossroads to determine if it's for you or not. And you'll swear when you're going through the process, you'll be like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I think my teacher doesn't like me. Why does he make me do this? Did his teacher make him do this? Can he even do these things now? And what's interesting about martial arts is one of the only systems around where you can actually chart your growth in a clear way. You can be like, well, last year I was out of breath and I couldn't do this. Now this year you're leading the workout. Last week you couldn't do one thing. Now this week you can do another. So you could chart your growth from one state to the next with martial arts. So there comes a point of maturity in martial arts where you change your relationship with pain or the idea of pain. Pain is no longer your enemy. Pain then becomes a comrade. And then you begin to notice that when pain is in the vicinity, you're no longer intimidated. When pain is in the vicinity, you realize that that is a sign that you're at the crossroads of your ascension. And what about discomfort? Discomfort, as we see, is a metaphor. It's like a petri dish of all types or all kinds of growth. Because essentially, you shouldn't come to spirituality to be safe. You shouldn't come to spirituality for it to be a safe space. As we discussed in the word of the day, and at least in the ATR, in the African traditional religions, spirituality is intimately intertwined with nature, and nature is brutal. They say only the strong survive. No, only those who know how to adapt survive. But nature does not guarantee you survival. So you have initiation, which is scripted traumas and dramas that you're going to go through in life anyway. And you might not guarantee to make it out of life, but you will make it through the initiation because life be life, man. So you don't come to spirituality to be safe. You come to be awake. Now, the question is, can you stay awake through the ache? Now, some people say, well, what about the light and love? I came to it for light and love. And I will say, in order to become the light or to be the light, you have to endure darkness. In order to become the light, you have to go through the fire. To become one with the fire, then you can become the light. There's so many people that join spirituality and religions to become part of some type of fellowship or brotherhood or sisterhood, but the thing about that is your brotherhood or sisterhood coming in common unity, coming together in common unity to do the internal work. Not just to be brothers and sisters, it's to do the work, the divine work. So now when we talk about the sacred power of transformation, sometimes it's synonymous with shadow work. Sometimes it's synonymous with going through what they call the dark night of the soul. Some people ask, how come the gods just don't do this? How come the gods just can't show themselves? How come the ancestors can't do this? There will come a time in your life where you have to come face to face with yourself. And there's a saying is when you find yourself, you encounter God. And that time is a period of silence in your life when it appears that all things abandon you. But silence is not emptiness. Emptiness in the metaphysic traditions, emptiness represents the presence of something divine. So when certain things get stripped away in your life, when certain people get stripped away in your life, you're just left with the silence. And you're like, where was God? And you'll realize that Neter was there the whole time. You see that Neteret was there the whole time. The ancestors were there the whole time. It brings to mind a certain Neteret called Merit Sekur. Merit Sekur means she who loves silence, or the one who loves silence. And her image is that of a serpent with a crown. It is said that she governs the necropolis and she administers either punishment or forgiveness. So let us deal with that. What is a necropolis? Necropolis is, once again, it's a Greek word. It means dead. Nikra, necro, negro. Polis. Polis is city, the city of the dead. So let us clarify some things that we practice a living tradition. In living traditions, we don't talk about dead people or the deceased. That word gets transplanted with the word ancestors. So when you say she's the guardian of the city of the dead, it's like, no, she's the guardian of the realm of the ancestors. And they said her shrine was found in mountains. They put her shrine in mountains. And as you know, as you ascend the mountain, it gets quieter and quieter as you go up to the mountains. And then you'll find her image in the darkness or inside of a mountain. It is interesting. Her name means the lover of silence. The silence is where you find the divine. Seker means silence. Seker means the plan. You have to contemplate the darkness. You have to contemplate the silence to figure out what the plan is. It is interesting that her shrines were in the mountain, and it's interesting the pyramidal shape of the mountain and the shape of the body when it's sitting in the cross-legged position is similar to a pyramid. And those who like meditation are seekers of silence or lovers of silence, because in the silence, you recognize what the plan is. And in that plan, because it says she is the one who administers punishment or forgiveness. So in that silence, when you find out or figure out what is the plan for you, then you get to determine, are you done punishing yourself, and are you ready to forgive yourself and get back to your sacred work? So with that, we say, do our netter for the power of transformation. And people say, well, what about the deities? When am I going to feel the love of the deities? The ancestors would say, love is a hoe. Love is a plow. A hoe, a plow, interchangeable, same word. Love is a plow. And what does a plow do? What does a hoe do? It breaks the earth. It breaks the ground. You hear of groundbreaking ceremonies to represent the future success of an endeavor on this ground. So in the spirit of love, the netter has to break us, break false images or false concepts we have of ourselves. What is it we're talking about? People want to wear the white, they want to carry the ankh, they want the titles. Those are false ideas of ourselves. There's nothing wrong with those things, those initiatory trinkets and implements and ankhs. All of that's cool, but those are symbols. That's not you. So yeah, you have to be tested. You have to go through the fire. Not so Netter can know, so you can know that you're doing things for the right reason. So things have to be broken, because that which is real cannot die. So after going through a process of breaking, we have to find out that what's real remains, because death makes way for life. It's interesting the things that we try to avoid. We try to avoid weakness. We try to avoid sickness. We try to avoid diseases. And it's interesting that weakness and disease often reveals our strength. I had to go through a life and death situations to reveal my true power to me. Early at the beginning of the year, I had to go through a very personal and cathartic transformation that required me to live everything that I've been teaching you all for the past 20 years. So you can never really avoid weakness. You can't avoid sickness. You can't avoid death, because they're all going to reveal how strong you are, or how strong you might need to be. Generally, when certain things happen, it just really represents that you're on a crossroads to your ascension. That Neter and Neteru and the ancestors have something big in store for you. So we have to say, do I Neter to the power of the sacred, or we have to say, do I Neter to the sacred power of transformation. So let me say in closing, but in opening of a further conversation that we have to have going forth to the rest of the year, that transformation isn't the only thing that we are supposed to be concentrating on. What also came up in the reading is team building, strategic team building. It's interesting in spirituality, all of this talk about me building myself, becoming divine. I don't join groups and I don't have to listen to anybody. The final boss in spirituality is to be reintegrated back into society, reintegrated back into groups, reintegrated back into teams. That is the final boss. And all this separation talk is really coming from people who had past church hurt, where there was sins in the synagogue, madness in the mosques, turmoil in the temples. So once again, so people left those things trying to find safety or refuge in spirituality. And remember, spirituality is synonymous with nature. Nature is brutal. So you mean to tell me that there's no turmoil in nature? There's no madness in nature? There's no hurt in nature? Because life just be life. So we have to come to a certain level of maturity and find resolution in that. I remember hearing the late great Kwame Ture say, I guess it was like 30, 35 years back, he said less than 3% of melanated people are part of organizations. That was 35 something years ago. And since then, I believe it's probably down to 1. Nobody wants to be a part of nothing. Nobody wants to join it. Everybody thinks they're the end all be all in themselves. And in reality, that's not how empires are built. So we have to find resolution in that. So if you have no organization, then there could be no nation. There could be no movement of the needle. A lot of people are having a conversation about what are we going to do as a people, but it's everyone's so self-centered. It's become the cult of the individual. So what's happening is there's been a spirit of voyeurism that's been happening since the advent of social media. So people look and watch other people do spiritual things, say spiritual things, talk spiritual things, do spiritual things. You could look at a person like me, you might like my rings, you'd be like, I like him. I like how he sounds. I like his voice. What he says makes sense. What he says makes me feel good. Even though I'm not going to do or follow any of the things that he says or implies any things that he says, I like him for some reason. I'm going to continue to listen to him. And then the needle doesn't move for our people. What about, I like what he says until he says something that I don't like, and then I quote unquote don't resonate with him. And because he said something I don't like, I'm going to say that none of the stuff he said before is correct. Or I'm not going to believe that any of the stuff he said before was correct. I'm going to forever look at this person with a side eye. What could be going on in this scenario? In this scenario, a person could be triggered, or it means something was activated in themselves. Be triggered, something got activated. When you get triggered or activated, Remember, we're talking about the sacred power of transformation. So when you get triggered or so-called activated, that is a sign that you might need to re-review or possibly release beliefs that may no longer be serving you. So we're on this path to truth, so-called truth, but everybody has their own version of truth, which is pretty much only what your subconscious has decided is the truth, or so that becomes your truth. So this trigger is activating you to re-review that thing that you held on to re-review if it's still helpful or not. And we hear a lot of people talk about not following leaders or not joining things, but a lot of time that's just a projection and a reflection of their inner restlessness. In fact, it's been proven in the human experience, most people want leadership because leadership takes your insecurities and your uncertainties and gives it direction. It's better to be moving in the direction that might not be the right direction than to stay forever stuck in uncertainty. What about the people that's like me, but when you listen to them speak, they be like, well, what are we going to do? When are we as a people going to get our thing together and things like that? When are we as a people going to take back this? Once again, there needs to be a resolution between that self and the people. It needs to be the healing of the church hurt, the sins in the synagogues, the madness in the mosque, the turmoil in the temple. So check it out. So from what I'm saying is this. So that me, self perspective that everyone thinks that they're so enlightened and so transformed is actually counter to all of the traditions that you study. It's counter to all of the traditions that you revere. It's counter to Kemet. It's counter to Ifa. It's counter to anything indigenous. All the people that you research so much, they didn't think the way you think. They didn't think me. Everything still was collectively. They understood that it's about being interdependent on one another, not dependent, but interdependent on one another. For instance, you could be a queen and king of your own house and your own family circumstances, and you work out your order, but that order that you have in your home doesn't always apply when you go to the workplace. At the workplace, it doesn't mean you're any less of a human being or less of a person, but you're part of something that existed before you, and that they have goals and objectives, and so it becomes mutually beneficial, so that the business or whatever has their goals and objectives, and they're allowing you to feed your children while you figure your life out also, because you don't necessarily have to work a job forever. It's just something that you're doing in transition till you figure out what it is that you have to do. So now the person's giving you opportunity to feed yourself and feed your family while they get the benefit off of it too, because all situations need to be mutually beneficial. It can't just be about you. It has to be about somebody else too. For instance, the same thing, you can be an entrepreneur and your business is growing, and you might hire somebody. That person you're hiring, you're not hiring them to be a slave. You're not hiring them because you think that they're less than you. You're trying to better yourself and benefit your life and your family while giving this person the opportunity to feed themselves and put food on their table while they figure out who they are and who they're going to become, because the person you hired is not meant to necessarily serve you forever also. You see the same thing with spiritual traditions. Many spiritual traditions are very old. They come from thousands of years back, and they all claim the authority to bring forth or administers Neter's will on earth. And they're allowing you to participate in helping Neter help us better. And that's a structure that you can come into also. It doesn't mean that you're less. It's just a structure that you have a part that you could play into it also. But that same institution, that religious institution, has to follow the laws of the state. And then that state has to follow the laws of the government. That, ladies and gentlemen, is called life. And that structure is always going to be there. It's concentric circles, but it's never going to totally be about you. And that's why I said we have to heal this resolution between ourselves and others. And that's partially why we offered the First Eye on Kemet course for half off. It wasn't just random. It was meant for those who are on the threshold of throwing their hat in the ring or wanting to learn to apply these teachings and play possibly a more instrumental role in the growth and the evolution of not just themselves, but the culture, and not just be a fan of Kemet, but be a player in the game. You have those that are actually in the game, and you have those that are on the bench. And what's interesting, the ones that's on the bench, they're superior players too, but their job is to fill in when something happens to the major players, but they're ready. They train with the first string players, but they're ready. But the fans get to wear the trinkets, they get to wear your number, your jersey, and go around and imitating you, being a voyeur, living voyeuristically through you, but they're not in the game. So when we offer things like First Eye on Kemet, is offering you a chance to possibly get off the bleachers and possibly on that bench or learn to train in the game in order for things to be better. So if you really I'll say it like this, is giving you the opportunity to see if you can be instructed and see if you could work with others in a mutually beneficial way. So we could say, if you really love yourself, and if you really love the culture, if you really love Netter, and you love your people, are you willing to go through temporary but necessary, excuse me, temporary but necessary growth and pain? And then and only then can we move the needle for us as a people. Again, if you're ready to throw your hat in the ring for the First Eye on Kemet course, contact us immediately and let us get prepared for the two orientation dates. The first orientation date is September 28th at 3 p.m. via Zoom, and the second orientation date is the following week at which is October 5th at 3 p.m. via Zoom. So with that being said, we close out as usual. Take what's useful and discard the rest. And if you were offended by anything, then just deal with it. No, I'm just playing. We're all imperfect vessels. However, we're all perfect in our imperfections. So with that being said, can we say we go in peace and satisfaction? So we say Shemem Atep, Dianu, Uncle Jasaneb. I say, embody peace, walk in your power, and stay dangerous.